realize is that we requested this iconic venue that has actually been the host home for so many of our police candidates. So it is befitting that we honor and recognize this event in this building, in this location. As a short housekeeping, there are 2 exits on the side. The restrooms are in the foyers. We will ask you to please silence your phones as we engage throughout the night. The significance of tonight's community unity offers a chance to have an invocation. And we have with us tonight Clarence Nathan, who is both a current police chaplain and a former Tampa Police lieutenant, to lead us. I'm going to ask you to stand and to please remain standing as we have the Pledge of Allegiance. Yes, at the mic, please, yes.
Father in heaven, we come now this evening to give honor and praise with thanksgiving to your glorious and mighty name. We thank you for your goodness and your mercy, for your love and kindness. We ask your blessings upon this event tonight. Be with and bless our honorable mayor, Castor, as she has to ponder these difficult decisions. Lord God, we pray that you will lead her, guide her, and direct her. The word of God says, Lord, as we are reminded, many are the plans in a man's heart, but it is your purpose that will prevail. And we ask now that you will lead, guide, and direct her in her decision-making, Father God, both her and her staff. Pray the blessing upon each one of these candidates, Lord, as they go forth. We ask your blessing to be upon Ruben Delgado and his family and the loss of his father. We ask that you would continue to strengthen them and guide them and care for them and keep them. We ask that your blessing will be upon this matter tonight. In Jesus' mighty name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Amen.
I would like to introduce Ava Siegenbaum from the Mayor's Youth Leadership Council to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
You may be seated. I would like to now introduce our community engagement members, starting with our elected officials. So if you're here, if you would please stand and acknowledge your presence. Mayor Jane Castor. City Council Chairman Orlando Gause, District 5. City Council Member Guido Maniscalco, District 6. City Council Member Charlie Miranda, Citywide District 2. City Council Member John Dingfelder, Citywide District 3. City Council Member Joseph Citro, Citywide and Public Safety Committee, Chair, District 1. Unable to attend this evening is the City Council Member Luis Vieira, District 7, and City Council Member Bill Carson, District 4. We would also like to acknowledge Public Defender Julianne Holt and our State Attorney Andrew Warren. Next, our community group representatives. Will you please stand to be recognized? First, our Citizen Review Board and esteemed CRB members, please stand to be recognized. Our Mayor's Task Force on Policing. Our Neighborhood Watch Coordinators. And our Neighborhood Association Presidents. Within our Parks and Recreation, members of our Teens Leading Change, please stand. Now, I will ask our Mayor's Leadership Council and Youth Corps, please stand and be acknowledged. Lastly, we want to thank all the media partners for covering tonight's event. Thank you so much for participating. Now we have a special virtual guest as Tampa's 57th two-term mayor, Pam Iorio, who will share some historical and local government thoughts about this special responsibility for the selection of the police chief, who is the guardian of our community. Will you please play the video?
Hi, I'm Pam Iorio, the former mayor of Tampa. I want to say hello to community leaders who are helping with the evaluation of the finalists to be the next police chief for the city of Tampa. I want to share with you my thoughts about the importance of this position and the role you will play in the future to help the next police chief be as successful as possible. When I took office 19 years ago, we had a significant crime problem. In fact, we had one of the highest rates of crime in the nation for a city of our size. We needed a police chief who was determined to change the way we did business and make Tampa safer for every single neighborhood. We found that in the person of Stephen Hogue, a former member of the Tampa Police Department who had left to become a police chief in a smaller community. Working with his team, which included then Assistant Chief Jane Castor, who would later succeed Hogue as police chief, they devised a plan to reorganize the police force and hold officers accountable for proactive policing. They actively partnered with the community and built trust through continual communication. They cared about the residents and their families in real and meaningful ways. An example being the creation of the Rich Houses in Sulphur Springs and in Robles Park. In fact, I remember at one neighborhood meeting in East Tampa, I asked the audience how many of them had the cell phone number of then Police Chief Castor. Almost the entire room raised their hand. That summed up the relationship between neighborhood leaders and the police. What they did worked. Crime fell dramatically over 8 years and has continued to decline. Today, Tampa's crime rate is 84% lower than the crime rate average of Florida cities its size. A low crime rate affects every aspect of our lives, where we live, work, and play, the strength of our economy, our attractiveness to visitors. It affects our state of mind and our daily level of anxiety. As mayor, my relationship with the police chief was the most important of all. I had sworn an oath to protect the citizens of Tampa. To fulfill that oath, the chief and I had to share the same values, agree on the same goals, and support one another when the going got tough. Every late night call from the police chief was bad news, sometimes the worst of all. 4 times during my tenure, we buried a member of the Tampa Police Department killed in the line of duty. The late night call I received from Chief Castor about the shooting of officers Curtis and Cocab after a routine traffic stop resulted in a massive 4-day national manhunt to find and to bring to justice the killer of these 2 outstanding officers. It is during a time of crisis when the mayor-chief partnership has to be authentic and strong. For me, those deaths revealed the special nature of the law enforcement family and their sense of duty and honor. To this day, and undoubtedly for the rest of my life, I carry in my heart the memory of those tragic deaths and the lives of those special men. Today, policing is more challenging than ever. Times and expectations change, our city continues to grow, and social justice is intertwined with community policing. But our underlying values remain the same. Treat every person with dignity and respect, earn the trust of our citizens, and work every day to make Tampa the safest city in the country. After the mayor makes her selection and the new police chief assumes this great responsibility, there are ways you can offer support. By being active in your neighborhood, you are able to give insights to the police about the issues you are facing. Let them know where the problems are and hold the city accountable for making meaningful changes. Don't hesitate to share ideas on how community policing can be improved. All ideas start somewhere, and I found that most came from the grassroots. And stand by the chief and the police force when a tragedy occurs. It makes a difference. And finally, I want to give a shout out to the members of the Mayor's Youth Corps and Leadership Council. We started the Youth Corps and Leadership Council to introduce young people to local government and issues in the hope that they might see how their future could be shaped through service. Today, as you participate in the process of selecting the next police chief for the city of Tampa, think about yourself in a future leadership role. One day, you might serve on Tampa City Council, be a city employee, lead a neighborhood association, or be a police chief or mayor. I have no doubt that you will one day play a role in making our city a better place.
Thank you. Now I will turn the program over to our Chief of Staff, John Bennett, who will guide us through the remaining portions of this forum.
Thank you, Osea. What a great introduction to tonight's event. So, as we go through this evening, I first want to introduce our candidates. As Osea mentioned, Interim Chief Butch Delgado is out with a family emergency, but I intend to read his bio into the record so everybody understands the importance of his public service. So as Osea shared, Mayor Castor's focus on community participation provides the city an opportunity to ask and listen to the police chief finalists and provide feedback this evening. First, I would like to introduce and read the bios developed by each candidate. I would ask that each candidate be recognized for their dedicated service to their respective communities that led them to this important opportunity to lead a major jurisdiction like the city of Tampa. First, to the far right, Assistant Chief Cherise Gause is a 28-year law enforcement veteran of the Miami Police Department. She began her career with the Miami Police Department in 1993 as a civilian dispatcher and has progressively ascended through the ranks. She was promoted to the rank of Assistant Chief of Police in September 2019 and currently leads the Field Operations Division. Assistant Chief Gause has held assignments in all three divisions of the department: Field Operations, Administration, and Criminal Investigations, respectively. She is passionate about public safety, community policing, constitutional policing, and community engagement. Assistant Chief Gause has earned her Master of Science degree in Organizational Leadership from Union Institute and University, a Bachelor of Public Administration degree from Barry University, and an Associate's degree in Criminal Justice from Miami-Dade College. She's also a graduate of the prestigious FBI National Academy, the Senior Management Institute for Police, and the Command Officer Development course from the Southern Police Institute, many of us know as SPI, in Louisville, Kentucky. Assistant Chief Gause has received numerous leadership and community service awards, including Legacy Magazine South Florida's 50 Most Powerful Black Leaders in Business and Industry, 2020 Woman of the Year, NYPD, Haitian American Law Enforcement Fraternal Organization 2019, and Legacy Magazine Miami's Most Influential and Prominent Black Woman in Business and Industry 2019. She's a member of several professional organizations, including but not limited to Miami-Dade County Association of Chiefs of Police, where she serves on the Police Reform Committee, National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives, we know as NOBLE, National Association of Women Law Enforcement Executives, known as NALI, Police Executive Research Forum, which we know as PERF, and the International Association of Chiefs of Police, as we know as the IACP. She also demonstrates her civic advocacy through memberships with Delta Sigma Theta Sorority, Inc., and Jack and Jill of America, Inc. Let's give her a round of applause for her service. Next is Mary O'Connor, dedicated the first 22 years of her career to serving Tampa and the people who call it home. She worked her way through the Tampa Police Department, retired as the Assistant Chief in 2016. She spent the next 5 years sharing lessons learned with agencies across the country through her work with the U.S. Department of Justice and the FBI Law Enforcement Executive Development Association, we know as LEDA. As a senior advisor with a leading law enforcement think tank, Mary helps police departments develop strategic plans for reducing crime by focusing on community engagement and evidence-based policing. Mary is also a senior faculty member of the FBI's premier leadership training program that helps develop police officers into well-rounded leaders who understand the importance of diversity, collaboration, social equity, and trust building. Her years of training have elevated Mary's breadth of knowledge and experience. She is ready to bring innovative ideas back to Tampa, where she discovered that law enforcement was her calling. Mary is most proud of the positive impact she's had on countless lives, from community members to police officers. She created an after-school program in a disadvantaged neighborhood that helped hundreds of children thrive. Mary was also instrumental in the development of breakthrough technology that improved officer and community safety. At the Tampa Police Department, Mary was known as a results-oriented, inclusive leader. She helped implement a progressive plan focused on smart policing and community partnerships that reduced crime and arrests by over 70%. She's ready to build on that success and once again serve the city that she loves. Let's give Mary a round of applause. And as Osea mentioned earlier, due to Chief Delgado's inability to be here tonight, doesn't take away from the amount of presence he's had in our community. He's worked over the past 5 months intimately with every neighborhood and every situation, and we're really proud of his interim service to date. So I do want to read his biography into the record. Interim Chief Ruben Butch, as we know him, Delgado, has served the citizens of Tampa in several capacities during his 23-year career with the Tampa Police Department. He has been operating as the interim chief of police since October 1st, 2021. Prior to his role as interim chief, he was the assistant chief of police overseeing police investigations and support service functions. Interim Chief Delgado is a strong leader who has worked in a variety of settings, both in patrol and in administration. He has served in all 3 patrol districts in the city, the Support Services Division, and the Criminal Investigations Division. During his assignment as captain of criminal investigations, he played an instrumental role in investigating a serial murder case in Seminole Heights in 2017. In late 2017, he was promoted to the major of District 1, and for those unfamiliar, that would be the southwest side of the city, where he previously served as a captain of the district earlier in his career. Chief Delgado effectively partnered with the community members and businesses to reduce crime and enhance the department's relationship with the community. In 2019, he was promoted to Deputy Chief of Patrol Operations, overseeing 3 patrol districts of the department. In February of 2020, he was promoted to Assistant Chief of Investigations and Support. Throughout 2020 and into 2021, Interim Chief Delgado served as the lead role for the public safety planning efforts of Super Bowl 55 in February of 2021. Go Bucks. A Tampa native, Delgado graduated from Jefferson High School and holds a Bachelor of Arts degree from the University of Florida. Interim Chief Delgado also attended the Southern Police Institute, hosted by the University of Louisville in 2016. In 2019, Interim Chief Delgado attended Tampa Bay Chamber's Leadership Tampa program. Currently, Interim Chief Delgado is attending the Major Cities Chiefs Association's prestigious Police Executive Leadership Institute. Interim Chief Delgado is married and has 2 children. And I'm sure somewhere in the background he's able to tune in tonight, so let's give him a round of applause for his service. Next, if we could bring up the slide for our national recruiter introduction. So on the screen, you see retired Chief Rodney D. Monroe, and is an accomplished and highly respected subject matter expert in community policing and police reform. With over 40 years of experience in law enforcement, retiring as Assistant Chief of Police in Washington, D.C., during his tenure with the D.C. Police and continuing to serve as Chief of Police for over 14 years in 3 cities. He is now sharing valuable knowledge and expertise with various law enforcement entities. Retired Chief Monroe has assisted organizations and police departments across the country in the recruitment, interviewing, assessment, and selection of several police chiefs. Under his leadership as Chief of Police in Charlotte, North Carolina, Richmond, Virginia, and Macon, Georgia, historical reductions in crimes were reached. These departments also experienced a significant increase in police and citizen relationships through the development and implementation of innovative programs and engagements. Chief Monroe continues his police reform efforts by partnering with noted professional organizations, providing consulting services and subject matter expertise in various collaborative reforms, critical incident reviews, and racial bias audits. Retired Chief Monroe currently serves as the Deputy Monitor for the Chicago Police Department Consent Decree. His work as a federal monitor and has focused on areas such as police community engagements, uses of force, training, accountability and transparency, supervision, officer safety and wellness, recruitment, hiring, and promotions. Chief Monroe has managed several large-scale events to include the 1998 Million Man March, 2 presidential inaugurations, and he was also our counterpart in the 2012 Democratic National Convention. He has written and spoken nationally on the planning and management of mass demonstrations and special events. And I know I don't normally try and speak for Mayor Castor because she does such a great job, but I think we would call Rodney a friend of Tampa and of law enforcement and the community all at the same time, because he's a person who values it's just us, not us and them. So we thank Rodney for his consulting oversight of our selection process. Now for the question and answer process, which is basically why you're all here tonight. Each candidate will answer 6 questions tonight and be offered a 2-minute or 3-minute wrap-up session. They will have a couple minutes to give their best answer. Keep in mind, this is a participatory process for community engagement. This is not a debate. So the candidates will be focusing on their police community competency and trust and reliability building. Each question will offer a new order of responses, with each candidate getting a first or second place position as an opportunity to respond. We're excited to have the Mayor's Leadership Council and the Youth Corps present tonight to ask the questions that have been developed by the larger community presenting this evening. So if we're ready for our first question, we have Susmita Gudla as part of the Mayor's Youth Leadership Council. So please ask the first question of our candidates. And Chief Gause, you go first.
Okay, thank you.
All right, hello. Why should we trust you to help us, the community?
Thank you for that question. Good evening, everyone. The reason that you should trust police is because we are the most noble profession. I think that when you think of trusting police, we have to put our best foot forward and make sure that we are treating the community in a way that is with respect and both dignity and accountability. First and foremost, I think we have to listen to the community and make sure that we're understanding the way that you all want to be policed and that we hear your concerns. A lot of times, the community just wants to be heard. Secondly, I think that communication is always going to be key. As long as we can have effective communication, trust will come. The next thing is accountability and holding ourselves to the highest standards possible for the good and the bad things that we may do. Next is transparency, making sure that we are transparent in anything that we do within the police department. I think that that certainly will breed trust. Holding ourselves to the highest level of integrity is always going to be important. When we hold ourselves to a high standard of integrity, it also breeds trust. The other thing I would say is what I call the 3 C's. Making sure that we police in a way that is community-oriented, making sure that we police compassionately, and making sure that we police constitutionally are the most important things. And making sure that our practices are based and founded on the 21st century policing pillars. I think that with the manifestation of those principles being in place, that trust will come.
Thank you. Mary?
Trust is a two-way process. Not only does the community have to trust us, we have to trust that the community is going to help us get our job done well and successfully for the justice of the victims. If we think about the word trust, we have to think of some words that would come to mind of what trustworthy leaders are about. Reliability, forward-looking, honest, integrity. All of those words that we raise our children to be as far as their core values. We need to stick to those core values in our policing efforts in order to have the community trust us as well. There is no difference between the core values that we instill in our loved ones and our children and the core values that we need to instill in our community. The other thing that I think the community would do well with trusting the police department is with being consistent and reliable. The police need to be consistent in their enforcement practices, and they need to be reliable, so when the community needs the police, they are there and they are going to solve the problem at hand. Nobody is in a worse situation when they pick up the phone and call 911. If someone is picking up the phone and calling 911, they are in crisis and they need help. And that may be the only encounter they ever have with a police officer, is that one time, that one encounter that we can go out and we can help them with the crisis that they called about. And that is our one chance, one encounter at a time, to instill trust and to relationship build, because it is so important for the community at large. Thank you.
Thank you. Our second question comes from Bella Ote, also from the Mayor's Youth Leadership Council. And Mary, you'll answer this one first.
What are your plans for ensuring the protection of marginalized groups and preventing police brutality?
Two-part question. I think I'd like to answer police brutality first. The words police brutality and Mary O'Connor cannot be in the same sentence. I don't tolerate any type of even perceived brutality from any of my law enforcement officers, never did. We have to treat the community with dignity and respect. And again, going back to my first answer, we may just have one shot at that. And if that perception is that that encounter was in any way brutal, we have to eliminate that word from our vocabulary. With that being said, we have to hold ourselves high to accountability standards. Holding our police officers accountable to their actions is going to release and reduce the perception of brutality. Marginalized groups are the community that we serve. We serve the entire community, including your term of marginalized groups, and it is our responsibility and our commitment that we will protect their civil rights and we will protect their right to peacefully express their rights. Going back to Chief Gause's constitutional policing, it is our responsibility to ensure that the protections afforded every citizen is respectfully protected by every Tampa Police Department member.
Thank you. Chief Gause?
Yes, thank you. First and foremost, I want to say, as I previously indicated, that dignity and respect have to be at the forefront of everything we do as a police department. And it doesn't matter what side of the city you come from. Everyone, marginalized, immigrant community, everyone should be treated with the same level of dignity and respect. In terms of law enforcement, this is truly a noble position, and there is no place for any individual that commits police brutality against any one of our citizens. So that's first and foremost. The steps that I would take would be, first, as a chief, I would hold that officer accountable for his or her actions. Next would be to launch an investigation through our internal affairs unit to validate the allegations and to come up with a finding based on their investigation. The next thing would be to reassign that officer, whether it be reassigning to a desk job or through a relief of duty process while that investigation is being conducted, so that we don't further harm the community if there has been an infraction that has occurred. And the last thing would be a discipline approach based on the findings of the investigation. It is important that we make sure that we are getting in front of this incident and making sure that we hold our officers to the highest level of standards. It goes back to the 3 C's that I mentioned before, making sure that we are policing in a constitutional manner, and making sure that we hold our officers and ourselves to the highest standard possible, and giving feedback to the community with that. A lot of times when certain investigations happen, they're concluded without a resolve. And so I want to make sure that this incident would be followed through from the beginning until the end, and make sure that we have that constant dialogue with the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Our next question comes from Blaze Payne, also from the Mayor's Youth Leadership Council. And Mary, you'll answer first.
Tampa is growing, and with it are events. How do you propose to continue keeping these events safe, given their increase in size?
We certainly see plenty of large events here in the city of Tampa, and that is not something that just happened overnight. I patrolled the streets of the city of Tampa in 1994, and I think that we were still hosting many large events even back then. What we need to do is we need to be transparent about our efforts. Like I said earlier about the communication being a two-way street, is we need the community to express their concerns to us. I have a concern about an upcoming event, the Super Bowl, the Gasparilla, any type of a parade. We have to hear their voices. They have to feel like their protection is a result of their concerns and their priorities being heard. Secondly, obviously with a large event and some of the unfortunate incidents that we've seen around the country, we have to be very prepared for the unexpected. We have done a phenomenal job in the city of Tampa for decades protecting our citizens at large special events, and we have seen many large special events, and we have to build on our successes, and we have to learn from the events of the nation as well. So my recommendation would be to just come up with a solid action plan. The action plan would be transparently communicated to the community, and we would seek their input on how we can make this event safe for everybody.
Thank you, Chief.
Yes, so I also have an extensive background in special events, critical incidents, as well as protests. As you all know, over the summer of 2020, many agencies were involved and had to engage in a lot of the protests that were happening in our different communities. And to this day, the city of Miami constantly has protests on a daily basis for an array of different reasons. So I think the key to preparation is just that, being prepared, communicating an effective plan, making sure that our staff is on the same page, making sure that our efforts are transparent. When it comes to even protests, for example, making sure that we are reaching out to the organizers of these events and informing them of the rules of engagement so that we are clear and we have clear and open lines of communication. I think intelligence is important, to gain as much intelligence about a particular event as we can, especially if they've already occurred in another city, to gain that information to help us in the preparation plan. I think operational plans are also important, so that we can measure our success. A lot of our events are reoccurring, happen on an annual basis. I know that you all have the Gasparilla coming this weekend. We have something like the Ultra Fest. We've had Super Bowls. And I think that looking back at our prior successes or failures is key to preparation for upcoming events. I mentioned meeting with the organizers already, making sure we have adequate staff in order to staff these events, and making sure that we are not outnumbered, for lack of a better word. Closely working with our local, state, and federal partners on these initiatives, And I think also just making sure that we don't, when it comes to protesting, allow people to break the law. We do want to be mindful of First Amendment right to protest, but anything like that should be done peacefully. And anytime crime starts to occur, looting, assaults on people, we have to make sure that we are addressing that and addressing it swiftly. And I think that with that, we would be able to have a successful event. And I want to make sure that we always put in the forefront the safety is the first priority in any event that we plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. We're now ready for our fourth question out of 6, and this comes from Kevin Vondruska.
What will you do to educate officers about prejudice, mental illness, and appropriate use of force?
And Chief, you'll go first on this one.
Yes. So if you could repeat the first part of the question, or just repeat the question for me.
What will you do to educate officers about prejudice, mental illness, and appropriate use of force?
Okay, thank you. So first and foremost, we have to make sure that we have the appropriate policies in place for all of these, how to deal with mental illness and how to deal with use of force issues. Secondly, we need to make sure that we are providing the staff with the proper training that is needed. There are several trainings to go along with mental illness. We do have a CIT unit. We also make sure that ICAT is in place so that they have the tools needed to address mental illness. One of the things that I think is important is to partner with organizations that are familiar, so clinicians that are experienced in mental illness and crises. It's important to pair our police officers with them. With respect to use of force, again, like I've said before, this is a noble profession, and again, there is no place for excessive use of force. And officers found to be guilty of that would be held to the highest standard and go through the same process that I mentioned before. We want to make sure that we're reinforcing training with use of force, de-escalation, procedural justice, and how we deal with our community. So there are an array of trainings that I think we would be able to prepare our staff with so that they are the best equipped to go out and deal with our community. When it comes to prejudice, it's the same thing. There is no place for racism in this police department, and I would make sure that that is not tolerated under my leadership.
Thank you. Mary?
Yeah, so I'll take each one of the points individually. Let's start with prejudice. I think that we have to understand that biases exist, but we can't take the biases that unconsciously or consciously exist that we all have and turn them into prejudices. I just want to make it very clear that I think there's a big difference between our biases and our maybe negative biases, which would indicate prejudice. So training, there is a plethora of training out there that teaches our police officers about bias, diversity, inclusion, and how to manage bias. And there's a lot of ways to manage it, but first and foremost, it's to be aware that it exists and to not see it as a negative connotation until it turns into prejudice. That cannot be tolerated in any of our law enforcement officers in the United States. Mental illness. The mental health crisis in this country is probably more on the forefront now than it has been in the history of most of our lifetimes. We are dealing with uncertain times. We are dealing with uncertainty with the pandemic, with protests that have happened across the country. We as a society are a little bit of a damaged society, and we need to recognize that and we need to address that. Partnering with social service agencies that can assist the police department with mental health issues, whether that manifests itself as a co-response model, we need to use the least amount of force necessary to de-escalate mental illness situations. That goes to the third point of use of force. The Police Executive Research Forum came up with guiding principles on the use of force in 2016, which guides police departments around the country on using the least amount of force necessary to handle that 911 call that came in. We want the police to trust us, and with being trustworthy makes us evaluate every situation as it stands. So training, and training for de-escalation, being aware of the fact that de-escalation is a priority, and being aware of biases can reduce all three of the points that you brought up.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Tristan House.
How can you improve school resource officer outreach in schools to help more students?
And Chief, we'll start with you.
Sure. Again, with schools, safety is our first priority. And I think that any programs that would incorporate youth and police and have the ability to build trust, I am in support of any program like that. We want to, though, be mindful that the officers are serving as role models and educating our youth. We want to ensure that they foster positive relationships among the youth and that the relationships do not become adversarial. It should be a positive interaction. Having conversations with parents on how they want their schools to be policed is important. Again, I go back to communication. Most school resource officers have the training needed in order to deal with our youth. It is important that we also are mindful and we are tracking our incidents and do data collection for any incidents involving our youth and the police, because we certainly don't want to hinder the relationship as it relates to school resource officers being in the schools. We want to ensure that we have juvenile diversion programs in place should they need it, make sure that we have social services in place in case the students need it, and in addition, just to get thoughts from the community on how it is that the schools should be led. We want to make sure that we are building the highest level of trust possible with our police, and we don't want to do anything to damage that trust. So I think that, again, public safety has to be at the forefront. We want to make sure that the relationships with school resource officers is a positive experience on both sides. I can say that from my agency, we've had it both ways. We've had where we had school resources in the schools, and then we've had them externally. I think it's truly important. There are school resource programs that they come up with, for example, Teen Talk, where it opens up lines of communication between the police and the community, and they are effective. So any community program that we have that supports that, school resource officers in schools, that is going to foster a positive relationship, especially at that critical age, I am in support of.
Thank you. Mary?
So school resource officers are only one aspect of the need for our police officers to reach our youth. It's a great opportunity, obviously, for students that spend a lot of your day in school, probably spend more time in school than you would like. So you have a positive role model there with you day in and day out. However, I think that the youth need to be reached by every Tampa police officer, not only the ones that are in the schools. But going back to the school resource officer program, if we, as the police chief of the city of Tampa, is going to be the guardian of the city, I see the role of the school resource officer being the guardian of the school. I want the school to feel like there's a partnership there. I want the students to feel safe. I want the students to feel like they have a listening board, a mentor, someone to look up to. I think that the school resource program is a phenomenal opportunity for those long-lasting community engagement partnerships and relationships that we need to focus so strongly on. Because like Mayor Iorio said in the beginning, you are our future. And we as a society, including in law enforcement, need to be committed to the future of our entire society for the betterment of our children, for the betterment of the citizens of the city of Tampa, and school resource officers is one good starting place for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Our final question comes from Cornell Boyd, and we will start, Mary, with you.
There can be a negative stigma associated with policing. How do you propose to improve the relationship with the community and the media?
One encounter at a time. We have to instill in our officers that every encounter matters. The community needs to feel that they have a voice. They need to feel inclusive. They need to feel like they have a seat at the table at the police department, that their voices matter. What's important to them should matter to us. If there's a violent crime uptick in a community, that's going to be the #1 priority for that community, is to feel the need for that violent crime to be reduced. So having relationships with the community starts with one encounter at a time. That could be as simple as that one encounter that's a traffic stop or a traffic crash, and that citizen needs to feel that they are a part of a relationship here and not in an adversarial situation. That goes back to the dignity and respect of every community member. The relationship with the media can be a complicated one, but I foresee that being a positive opportunity for them to feel as though they are a member of the community as well. Because if we are going to serve the community at large, that involves everybody, regardless of what their profession is. The media needs to feel that they have a police chief that's going to respond to their requests, that they are going to get a response in lightning speed, because speed is a lot, and I want them to feel that they have a voice at the table. Increasing relationships with the community and the media really are synonymous. It's one encounter at a time. It's one conversation at a time. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
Yes. So again, going back to the ringing theme is dignity and respect for all citizens of the city of Tampa. You get one shot at an encounter. We always say that first impression is your lasting impression, and it is true. I know it's cliche, but it is true. And so all it takes is one bad encounter to change the way that people perceive police officers. And so we have to be mindful of that. It is also everyone's job, each and every person, each and every member of the City of Tampa Police Department has an obligation to build relationships, from the public service aide to the 911 dispatcher that answers the call. We all have an obligation to make sure that we're moving the needle forward when it comes to building positive relationships. Going back to the community, listening to the community, communication is going to be key, again, to building any relationship, to make sure that they are heard, they want a voice. We talk about procedural justice, giving them a voice, being fair and impartial, making sure that we are fair in our decision making. All of those steps are important. When it comes to the media, the police have an obligation to inform the public of newsworthy events. The media has an obligation to report that news. So we need to find a balance. We need to find a meeting in the middle to make sure that the information is relayed in a positive manner and in an appropriate manner, to make sure that they get the story right. And so that goes along with hand in hand with building those relationships and making sure that we have positive interactions with our media folks. It is also important to make sure that our public information officers are working with the media constantly to improve those relationships. And it truly does go hand in hand, because giving out media information also builds the public's trust. It is a great story for us to see positive interactions on the news. So it all works hand in hand, and as best we can, we need to foster positive relationships with the community as well as the media. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. And I just want to remind our guests tonight that while there were 6 questions brought forward tonight for time management's sake, out of a plethora of questions that were combined from the community from all different aspects, there's also going to be a segment tonight where you can ask the candidates for chief face-to-face in a community mingle, which will be announced here shortly. So there's plenty of opportunity to ask your question to each one of those candidates. Now we're going to go into some closing comments. Each candidate will get 2 to 3 minutes to tell you, the community, why they think they would be the best opportunity for the next police chief in the city of Tampa. So Chief Gause, we'll start with you.
Okay, thank you. Well, again, good evening, everyone. I want to thank you for the opportunity to be able to discuss how my skills and experience can contribute to the continued success of the Tampa Police Department. Tampa is a beautiful city that is on the rise, and I want to be a part of that growth. Policing, as we have known it in the past, has changed tremendously, even over the past couple of years. And the future of policing, though, I think is still optimistic. I think that we can move the needle forward in a positive manner when it comes to police and community relationships. I think that as an external candidate, I bring a unique perspective in that I offer the opportunity to move away from the status quo, an opportunity for a fresh start. I want to lead the change, and I am a well-rounded leader, full of experience. I am committed to making this city safer, and I'm committed to building trust and legitimacy with community members, as well as business owners. My top priorities would be crime reduction, building relationships with the community, focusing on officer wellness, and making sure our officers are equipped to go out and do their jobs on a daily basis. Additionally, training would be a primary focus for me. And lastly, leveraging technology. I have 27 years of progressive leadership experience in a major city police department. I would be ready on day one to serve as the police chief of Tampa Police Department, and it would give me nothing but great joy and honor to be the next police chief. I thank you all for the opportunity to be here, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Chief. Mary?
Thank you, everybody. It's been a pleasure and an honor to be here tonight. So as you heard in my bio, I dedicated the first 22 years of my career to the people in the community that live, work, and play here in the city of Tampa. I knew from a young age that this was my calling. An 18-year-old transplant from the Northeast studied at the University of South Florida and St. Leo University and ended up at the Madeira Beach Police Department as my first job. When I landed at the Madeira Beach Police Department, I had absolutely no idea that that was going to be my life's work, was to serve. The family and the sense of community at that department was something that I wanted to be a part of, and I wanted to carry throughout my career. During my time at Tampa PD, I was always very passionate about justice for victims and those that needed help. I am proud of all the community positive interactions that I have made and relationships, because I feel like our purpose in life as people is to thrive on human connections and all be on the same page as far as what the future holds. Human connections and positive human connections have the power to inspire change and build trust that we so desperately need. Social connections and feelings of belonging are essential to satisfaction, and what we are looking to do is satisfy the citizens of the city of Tampa to make sure they feel safe. After I retired in 2016, I knew I wasn't quite done. I have taken the need for relationships and networking to the next level. And as you heard in the beginning, I have a tremendous amount of experience working across the United States. So I've taken the narrower focus of just the city of Tampa and expanded my knowledge across the United States. In the last few years, I have encountered and taught and trained and assisted police departments everywhere and thousands of law enforcement officers. The relationships are the most important part. The human connections are the most important part. The father of modern policing, Sir Robert Peel, in 1829, coined the term, "The police are the public and the public are the police. And we need to keep that in mind here in 2022, that we are all in this together, and it's all about connecting to each other. In closing, I want to give everybody in the room my cell phone number. Area code 727-481-2806. I welcome any one of you to give me a call, and let's talk through any unresolved questions or issues that you may have from tonight. I welcome the calls. I look forward to serving this fine city and everyone that lives here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. And before I bring Mayor Castro for some closing remarks, let's give them a round of applause for their work tonight. And I know it's been said multiple times, but our youth are our future. Let's give our Mayor's Youth Leadership Council a round of applause for their courageous support. And with that said, who needs no introduction, Mayor Castro, if you'll close us out tonight. Thank you.
All right, thank you to everyone who is here in person and virtually as well. I also want a few thank yous. I want to thank Rodney Monroe, who is recognized as a very important and renowned voice in law enforcement, and I thank him for helping us in this endeavor and also for being a friend. And then also thanks to Pam Iorio for sharing her thoughts and her experience on the importance of that relationship and the significance in ensuring that we have the right leader for our police department. I also want to thank Administrator Osea Wynn and Chief of Staff John Bennett for all that they did to put this event together. And thank you also to the Mayor's Youth Corps Leadership Council, and then also was not recognized, but also participated in proposing questions for the candidates, was the Parks and Recreation Teens Leading Change. And I think there's some of them here. Are you still here? Can't see out in the audience, but let's give them all a round of applause. As many of you know, I spent 3 decades at the Tampa Police Department, and it's an organization and really a noble endeavor, as was set up here several times. And it's something that is a part of my DNA, and clearly I could not change, and I would not change if I had the opportunity. I loved every single moment of being able to go out and serve our community. I truly believe in my heart that the Tampa Police Department is the best law enforcement agency in the nation, but one of the reasons that they are is because they are always looking for ways to change and ways to improve in the service to our citizens. And I think that that is very, very important. Robert Kennedy once said that a community gets the kind of law enforcement that they insist upon. And that's a statement, that's a saying that I have carried with me throughout my time at the Tampa Police Department and now as a mayor as well. That it's got to be that partnership between the community and the police department and what kind of a city you are going to have. And in order to have a successful city, you have to have that foundation of safety and security. As mayor, I could not, and with city council, I could not be able to realize the vision for our city if it was not seen as a safe and secure city. A lot of the words that you heard up here this evening were recurring, and one of them was, or 2 of them were incorporated in the golden rule of the Tampa Police Department. First, the mission of the Tampa Police Department is very simple, and it's been the same for 18 years, and that is to reduce crime and improve the quality of life through a cooperative partnership with every citizen. And that's something that's very simple, it's easy to remember, and it defines every single decision, every single task, every single performance of the members of the Tampa Police Department. And the golden rule that the officers hear the day that they are sworn in, and hopefully every day throughout their career, is that everyone is treated with dignity and respect. And those are things that are very simple ways to lead your life as a law enforcement officer, and frankly, just as a member of our community. So I also want to thank the community. I thank you all again for coming out here this evening, for being a part of the success that we have realized here in our city. But we are continuing to change. As you heard from both of the candidates here, policing is changing. And although the pivotal event that sparked that change was very, very negative, the murder of George Floyd, I look at the positive things that have occurred since then. The community getting involved with law enforcement, making sure that the officers are doing the things that the community wants to be done. And then also realizing that we're asking law enforcement to do too much, that we as a society have to understand our responsibility in dealing with mental illness, in dealing with those social issues, addiction, homelessness, those types of issues that affect each and every one of us. It's all of our responsibility. So I thank you for understanding that role and responsibility in creating the city, turning Tampa into a world-class city that is accepting and inclusive of everyone. So I thank you all for your time this evening. I hope you stick around and take the time to interact with the candidates. I thank Chief Gause for coming up here. I thank you, Mary O'Connor, also. And then clearly our thoughts and prayers are with Chief Ruben Delgado during this very, very difficult time for him and his entire family. So thank you very much for coming out this evening, and please stick around and have a conversation with these amazing candidates. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. As the mayor invited the community, and again with the support of City Council and all of our partners, I also want to give a shout out to our Community Engagement Director, Janelle McGregor, for putting a lot of this together tonight. So as we egress out of the theater, and again, a tremendous thank you to HCC and their leadership on short notice to put this together for us. We're going to egress down to the first floor because there's a lot of social distancing space. Of course, we're still under the pandemic realm, if you will. So if you could go down to the first floor at your own pace, the candidates will be down there, and the mayor has ensured that we have feedback loops available. There'll be an opportunity to leave some remarks, whether it's known or anonymous. There'll be a drop box if you wanted to give some feedback on what you saw tonight. And also feel free to comment about the event. You know, this is a chance to realize the city's vision, led by our mayor and supported by groups like council, to bring government into the community and not always keep it downtown. So that's a chance. So if you want to comment about the forum, comment about the candidates, you can leave that, and we're going to be sure to read each and every one of those. So thank you and have a safe evening.